Week 5 is upon us, and we are buying some running backs. Today, we're breaking down 4 running back buys, 2 running back sells. We'll have you covered with wide receivers later today, but we got some heater names on deck. These are big name running backs that we're going out and purchasing in fantasy football this week.
Bring out the credit cards.
Exactly. The running back landscape is the weirdest I've ever seen it. Some of the guys that we weren't super high on coming into the season are performing at a super high level. Some of the guys that we were really high on not performing at a super high level right now. But you know what? I think things are going to course correct over the next couple of weeks. And speaking of that, Danny, I'll let you take it away with your first buy, who we drafted as the RB1 or 2 in fantasy this year. And he has not performed that way.
No, not at all. And that's going to be Breece Hall, running back at the New York Jets. For a temperature gauge, because I'm sure a lot of people will be thinking, okay, well, where do you have him ranked rest of the season? I have him ranked as my 8th overall player, my RB2 still. I have not changed in the fact that I still believe Breece Hall is going to be the RB2 in fantasy. The only difference now, of course, I think Barkley has to be above him based off what we've shown. But with Breece Hall, people are almost completely off of him. They're talking about, Braylon Allen's usage. Braylon Allen just looks superior to Breece Hall at this point. And I'll give Braylon Allen his flowers. Like, he has looked like a very good, efficient running back. And I do think he's one of the premier handcuffs, potentially even, a standalone value in terms of the running back position, a guy that I'd probably be ranking in the RB30, RB35 range on a week-to-week basis. But are we just ignoring that Breece Hall is still getting legitimate RB1 usage? Is it probable that he hits a legendary ceiling? Maybe not. Again, I don't think with Braylon Allen there, he can possibly be a 25-plus point per game guy, but is 20-plus PPR points per game still very well in the range of outcomes? Absolutely. This is still a guy that has played 71+% of the snaps for the Jets in every single game, and going into Sunday, he was averaging over 20 points per game. Yes, if you watch the Broncos game and you see 10 carries for 4 yards, 1 catch on 5 targets, I understand why you would be concerned considering the fact that when you look in your lineup, it's only 3.8 PPR points, but he's still getting the usage that we want to see. He still has autonomy inside the 5. He still has 70+% of the routes for this team. This is one of the few bell cow running backs in the league, even despite Braylon Allen's usage. So, Robert Saleh himself was actually asked about his decision not to use Braylon Allen on the goal line. He said, definitely something we can look at, but like I've said, we're always going to lean on Breece Hall. He is our workhorse back, and the usage dictates that he is the workhorse back, like I said. If there's people in your league that are maybe concerned that this is going to be a 60-40 moving forward or a 55-45 for Breece, this is where you take advantage and spike on the opportunity. Because Breece Hall, he hasn't been playing like himself. Jets offense has also struggled, but at the same time, like we said, he was averaging over 20 points per game, even despite being inefficient. We know he's an elite talent. As soon as he starts showing the efficiency we saw last year, we already know he's going to contribute in the passing game. And this Jets offense as a whole enters the red zone, enters the inside the 5 areas more often than they have in the first few weeks. This guy still has, like I said, a 20, 21, 22+ point per game projection. And this might be the only time in the year that he's actually attainable in your open market. So people might be thinking, well, it's a straw man argument. Obviously, people aren't going to trade Breece Hall. This is the one likely opportunity you have where if you don't have Breece, you can actually go out there and trade for him. I'm not saying you're going to go out there and trade, Derrick Henry straight up for him. Obviously, Derrick Henry is a trending name. Maybe in your league that could be possible. What I'm trying to say is that anytime you can get a player that is ranked in the top 2 of his position at any less of an opportunity cost, you have to go and explore. Because I see some of these deals right now. You're getting the Braylon Allen, Breece Hall stack for Aaron Jones and Michael Pittman. That's a perfect opportunity. Aaron Jones coming off a high. Vikings offense looks good. Michael Pittman, his first good game of the year. You package those guys together, you get Breece Hall. Chris Godwin plus Breece Hall for Derrick Henry plus Tyreek Hill. Again, a lot closer of a deal, I would say. I think this is a fair deal for both sides. But for me personally, I believe a lot in the role that we've seen from Chris Godwin in this Bucs offense. I have still concerns with Miami with Tyreek Hill until Tua Tagovailoa gets back. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to transition the risk of Derrick Henry to Breece Hall, who I believe in more long-term in the year. And you see some of these other deals like George Pickens plus Breece Hall for Alvin Kamara plus Jameson Williams. You're getting off 2 riskier assets for a guy that I believe in more long-term in Breece Hall. I think these are all really good transitions. Again, I'm not saying any of these are like go out there and fleece your league mate, but if you can get it for an attainable price, you have to do your due diligence.
Yeah, he's had 4 targets in every single game. He's not playing well, but like the thing with him and Garrett Wilson too, we'll talk about wide receiver trade targets as well, but the thing with both of these guys is like we have a pretty good track record of them being good players, if not potentially elite players, and especially with Breece, they just aren't playing that way. Like it's Nathaniel Hackett, it's Robert Sala. Again, this was a weird game environment. The weather was horrible as well. Like Breece Hall's losing his footing. There was a bunch of crap going on. I think Breece Hall is definitely an attainable asset on the open market, like you said. And yeah, you have to be sending offers for this guy. You have him ranked RB2. I would still rather have him than Saquon rest of the season. Maybe that's take lock or whatever, but I still believe he has the receiving upside that Saquon doesn't have at this point in time. And once the efficiency follows, and the other thing too is like the Jets offense, there's a lot of moving parts. They're still figuring things out with Aaron Rodgers there. Do I think they're going to be the best offense in the NFL rest of season? No, but I do think they have a chance to still be a top 15, maybe even a top 12 unit as the season goes along and as Aaron Rodgers gets more comfortable. And hopefully Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson playing better will result in the offense being a lot better too, because they also have Mike Williams coming off an ACL tear. If he's back on the field making plays, that helps the offense. Braylon Allen getting his 8 to 10 touches per game and he's efficient on those carries, helps out the offense, keeps Breece Hall fresh. So yeah, he's one of the best running backs in fantasy still. I have not wavered on that stance, but yeah, he's maybe not quite to the legendary upside ceiling that we thought we were getting out of Breece.
Yeah, and again, I do think at this point you have to rank Barkley higher just because we know what the offense can bring to the table on a week-to-week basis. We still have some concerns with the Jets, and I think Barkley doesn't have a Braylon Allen versus Breece does. So I do think you do have to take Barkley over Breece Hall, but at the same time, like we said, he is clearly, to me, the RB2 in fantasy because we do have some concerns. We mentioned Bijan Robinson as a buy last week. I would say Algier is just as big of a part of his offense as Braylon Allen is a part of the Jets' offense.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely fair. The other thing to keep in mind with Breece too is like he is a very good buy for those of you that are 3-1 or 4-0 because he has a couple tougher games coming up. I mean, they play the Vikings this week, the Steelers in week 7, and the Patriots in week 8 with Buffalo mixed in there in week 6. But the playoff schedule is pretty strong. I mean, they play Miami in week 14. Presumably Tua would be back for that game. Jacksonville in week 15, Los Angeles Rams in week 16, Buffalo Bills in week 17. It's a lot of high scoring game environments and potentially a lot of exploitable defenses as well. So I like Breece Hall, especially if you guys are in a winning position right now and you have, like you said, a Derrick Henry or an Alvin Kamara or, Kyron Williams, somebody who's had some good weeks so far that you can use to get up to Breece Hall. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you just mentioned the Miami Dolphins in terms of his playoff schedule. Let's talk about the Miami Dolphin himself with Devon Achane, because I also do agree with you that he is one of the biggest buys in fantasy right now.
Yeah, and also like Breece Hall, if this is your classic 3-1, 4-0 buy, you don't buy Devon Achane if you are 1-3 or 0-4. Like I believe in Devon Achane still, even with Tyler Huntley on the field, but the reality of the situation is he is going to be better week 8 onward when Tua Tagovailoa is reportedly coming back to play quarterback for the Dolphins, because right now the Dolphins haven't just been bad, they've been unwatchable. They have been horrible. On offense. Achane is getting a great workload. He was inches away from saving his day with a touchdown yesterday. Man, without Raheem Mostert on the field especially, he's been 63% of the snaps, 71% of the snaps, 72% of the snaps. And if Raheem Mostert comes back, that's good for the offense. Like, I'm really, really not concerned from an efficiency standpoint with Achane because everybody's looking, oh, look, he regressed. Of course he had to regress from last year. It's like, yeah, his fucking quarterback is hurt, man. No shit, he regressed. There's no way he was going to keep up that efficiency with Tyler Huntley and Skylar Thompson. Like, Tua Tagovailoa takes a lot of crap for not being, an elite quarterback in the NFL, but you know what he can do? He can support Tyreek Hill. He can support Devon Achane. He can support Jalen Waddle. It's an easier matchup this week coming up against the New England Patriots as far as like game environment, and the game should be close. Then they get the bye to get Devon Achane healthy because he's also been limping around a little bit in some of these games too. And Tua is eligible to come off of IR in week 8. I think he will. It's reported that he doesn't even have any symptoms for the concussion right now. And this whole thing may have been like a PR stunt to make sure that they really cared about Tua's health. By all accounts, he's going to be back on the field. And I'm not really worried about this Dolphins offense. Hopefully they can like tread water from like a playoff standpoint, but I think Achane is a perfectly good buy, especially, I mean, you're getting him for some of these price tags you guys can see here. Kareem Hunt, Deontay Johnson, Trey Pickens and Rashad White for Terry and Devon Achane and Garrett Wilson for, I mean, this one makes a lot more sense. I mean, Justin Jefferson's obviously an elite player, but if you wanted to tier down from Justin Jefferson to get more depth at Garrett Wilson and Devon Achane, I think that's a pretty good package and two kind of buy lows that you'd be going after. But again, Achane, if you can get him as a 3-1 or a 4-0 team for anything less than the top 6 running back that I still view him to be, then you have to go out and send some offers.
100%. If you're in an advantageous situation of your team right now, like you said, even if you're like 2-2 with a high amount of points and you know your roster's in a good spot to be able to make a move for Achane, He feels like the overall general consensus is overweighing the split without Tua Tagovailoa right now. Because again, it is bleak. It looked awful. It was on an island game. He didn't play well. You might be able to get him for low in RB1, high in RB2 type of price tags. Like, for example, that Hunt and Deontay deal. I mean, Deontay's on a big high right now. Kareem Hunt obviously takes, I think, 16 opportunities in the game for the Chiefs. That may be an attainable package. I know some people are watching like, oh my God, that would never happen in my league. Okay, cool. Then it would happen in other leagues is what we're trying to say. So there's going to be pessimism. There's going to be overall emotions for the person that has Devon Achane right now, like the person with Breece Hall. I'm not saying in every single league, you're not saying in every single league that they're going to be easily attainable. But at the same time, the fact that they're attainable makes them a buy in their own right.
Yeah, exactly. So send out some offers for these two guys, and I'm going to just rope the next guy in because he's also one of these high-end like I still have all three of the guys, including Achane and Breece, and this next guy that I'm going to talk about as a top 6 running back rest of the season. And I guarantee you they are not valued universally across every single league as top 6 running backs. And my second buy is Bijan Robinson. The panic level is very high for Bijan managers. We just talked about him last week. So I know this seems kind of like me repeating myself, but the Falcons offense is figuring things out. The wheels are turning. The offense, a new offensive coordinator, new system, new quarterback. Everything's new here. It's probably not what we thought it was going to be. The Falcons, the leader of this division.
I mean, do we have to give Arthur Smith his flowers? Because holy Christ, I think Zach Robinson, despite coming from the Rams, is there a difference right now?
Yeah, I mean, Rams offensive coordinator doesn't necessarily make you good. I mean, thankfully we got the good one in Tampa Bay with Liam Cohen right now, but they're figuring things out is the point. And entering this week, Bijan Robinson had an elite workload. He was top 3 in target share. He was top 6 with an 82% snap share on the season. One game where Tyler Algier looks good. We knew Tyler Algier was good. This isn't new information. We all knew he was a good running back. And Bijan had a 20-plus yard receiving touchdown called back due to a phantom holding call as well. He has favorable matchups in 3 of his next 5 games. He's still a young player. He's still getting better. The offense is still getting better. They're going to figure it out. Like, I'm not really worried about Bijan Robinson. I know it's like, it's hard to rationalize why I'm not worried, but I know he's a great player. And I think that the offense is getting better each and every week. Like, think about what the Falcons looked like week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers to what they've looked like the last couple of games. They're figuring things out. Kirk Cousins looks more healthy. Offensive line's protecting a little bit better. The offense is moving a little bit better. Drake London's playing a little bit better. It has not splashed over onto Kyle Pitts, but Bijan Robinson still has a chance to be a part of a really solid unit, a top 15 type of offense. And again, going to, looking ahead at schedules, man, his playoff schedule was a big reason why everybody loved Bijan Robinson coming into the season. I mean, you look at Washington in week 17, you look at the New York Giants in week 16, the Raiders in week 15, the Vikings tough matchup in week 14, but then you got the Chargers. You also have the Saints mixed in there too. Like, there's a lot of high scoring game environments, a lot of favorable matchups. So again, typical 3-1, 4-0 type of teams. The people who I'm sure who are watching these videos looking to get trade targets are probably people who are looking to upgrade their roster and get better in their starting roster. If you are 4-0 right now, if you are 3-1 right now, the worst thing you can do is assume everybody that has performed on your team so far is going to continue to do the exact same thing all season long. What you should be doing is making sure that your team is as good as it possibly can be going forward.
People are always blinded by the immediate returns. So if you're 3-1 and you're 4-0, you have players that everybody in your league are going to want straight up because they're going to see that you're 3-0 or 3-1, you're 4-0, you're probably top 3 in your league in terms of points for, if that's going to be the case. There's going to be players that are very ideal, very appealing for the managers that are struggling right now. And I'm telling you right now, the guy who drafted Bijan in the first round, is he even 2-2? Is he even 3-1? Like, he's probably a 1-3 team right now. And if that's the case, he's probably sick watching all the players that were selecting around Bijan Robinson performing, like Justin Jefferson, like Jamar Chase, even to a smaller degree, Breece Hall has just been straight up better than him comparatively at the running back position. He's going to understand that, and he's going to rationalize, oh, maybe I got to make a splash. Maybe I got to make a big move. And if that's always the psychology in somebody's brain when they're 1-3, that they have to make a move to improve, we have to be on the other side where when we're 3-1 and we're 4-0, we need to be able to take advantage of that. If we can get Bijan Robinson for 85% of his pre-draft cost, because again, he probably went 105 to 108 in a lot of your leagues. I'm telling you right now, even if he's available for a second round price tag, you have to be imploring your options.
Yeah, because if we redrafted today, would he go necessarily quite as high as we had him ranked? I still have him ranked at 107. That's basically where he was ranked coming into the season for me.
Yeah, like the only difference for me is with Breece and Bijan. First of all, again, I have Barkley above them. He's my third overall player rest of the season just because of the competition behind him. I feel more confident in. And the only difference too would be like Nico Collins going to be up there, Amon St. Brown, JJ, and Chase for me. But right after those guys, those stud wide receivers and Saquon Barkley, these two are the next ranked players in my rankings.
Yeah, yeah. And like, again, a lot of people like to get on Bijan and be like, oh, he's one of the more overrated running backs in the league and all this kind of stuff. It's like, watch the games, man. Like, Bijan's a great player and he's getting a good workload. It is a matter of the offense not being great right now. And hopefully the offense gets better. I'm confident that the offense will start to figure things out because Kirk Cousins looks fine. He looks like a good quarterback. I think the offensive play calling could use a little bit of tweaking so far. And I think they're going to be smart enough coaching staff to know what they're doing. Like I've seen Raheem Morris coach football teams. He coached the Buccaneers back when I was a kid, and he's learned a lot. And I think he's adjusting a lot better in this Falcon situation because just think of the growth that they've had since week 1. That's what I'm going to keep going back to. And I think by week 8, week 9, week 10, this team is going to look a lot better than they looked in week 1, week 2, week 3.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think he's one of the best buys in fantasy right now. Another one of my favorite buys in fantasy. And one of these trades specifically, you might actually disagree with because we were actually talking about it off camera going into the video. And I believe you said that you have him ranked one spot ahead of Joe Mixon. But to me, Joe Mixon is the biggest slam dunk situation. Like if you're a 3-1, 4-0 football team, and you can get a guy that I personally project as soon as he comes back as a mid-range running back one, he's currently valued, I believe, as the RB14, RB15 in terms of flock fantasy right now. And to me, if you're in an advantageous position where you don't have to rely upon the points specifically for this week, 2 weeks from now going forward, I have full faith in Joe Mixon based off what I've seen from this offense and based off the role I saw from Joe Mixon when he was healthy in this offense. It already sounds like he returned to practice last week. He's already listed as day-to-day according to D'Amico Ryans. And like I said, this team has tried to feature Cam Akers in the last 2 weeks, but they just haven't had success moving the football in the ground game. The 1 week they had success running the football was when Joe Mixon was healthy in week 1, and he was arguably the biggest workhorse in fantasy. Like we were talking about after that game, is Joe Mixon top 5 rest of the season? Is Joe Mixon a guy that I would rather have than Jonathan Taylor rest of the season? Those were the discussions we were having from Joe Mixon. Obviously, unfortunately, suffers that ankle injury in week 2, but I still think he has that same upside. Everything we've seen from the Texans offense, Nico Collins looks like a superstar. We know what CJ Stroud's able to bring to the table, and we know the tendencies of Bobby Sloak. Once they're inside the 10, inside the 5, if they have a running back that can go forward and punch it into the end zone, we have seen them rely upon that. And we saw that in week 1 when Joe Mixon scored 26.8 PPR points. Joe Mixon handled all of the inside the 5 work, 91% of the short down and distance work. He even ran 47% of the road. So it wasn't like he was just this 2-down banger. 71% of the snaps, 70+% of the rushing attempts. I have no holds, no hesitance with Joe Mixon's role and Joe Mixon's ability in this offense to play into that role when he comes back. The only cause for concern is when does that happen? I'm a little bit more optimistic than you. I think there's a real case he can even play this week or at worst be back for next week. And some of the deals you can get him for, like we mentioned, the one you may disagree on is Bijan Robinson. We'll talk about that in a second. But these other deals, I mean, I just mentioned I love Breece Hall. I think if you need depth, Godwin and Joe Mixon is a very fine pivot to be able to make. You can buy George Pickens for Joe Mixon right now. Do it in every single one of your leagues. Joe Mixon plus DJ Moore for Ramondre, Shaheed, and Addison. This is the classic 3-for-2 Fugazi, 3-for-2 pyramid scheme we always say. If you can get this type of deal, you can do it every time. And I think 2 people, I guess, were able to make George Pickens for Joe Mixon to go to show you that if you have George Pickens, maybe send him for Joe Mixon. It might get accepted.
Yeah, and there's been a bunch of guys that have been like overperforming too. I mean, you made a trade in our league where you sent off Jordan Mason for Joe Mixon, and I think that makes exactly. That makes a lot of sense, especially if you're in a position where you're winning games and you don't, I'll talk about Jordan Mason in a little bit, why I think he's a half decent sell right now, because if you're in a winning position, there's a good chance you have Jordan Mason on your team. Most of the teams that have Jordan Mason are probably 3-1, 4-0, and you can pivot that into somebody that's a little bit better long-term. Yeah. I mean, I had an epiphany while you were talking that the whole NFL feels like September is the new preseason. Does that feel that way to you? Like all these teams that had changes and like new offenses and new coordinators and things of that nature appear to look like they're playing preseason games most of September, sans a couple of star players performing at a high level. And then the teams that like played their players in the preseason, like the Houston Texans, for example, actually looked like a functional offense right from jump, right from week 1. Whereas like the Falcons and the Jets, it looked like it's like mid-August right now when they're playing football games. And they have like a couple good plays. And then it's like, oh, most of the time they still look like a preseason operation. But like you said, Joe Mixon, Texans offense still has like some dimensions they haven't even explored yet. Like Tank Dell hasn't gotten going yet. He's been banged up. we still haven't really, I mean, we've seen, Stephon Diggs move the chains. We've seen Nico Collins, he's leading the NFL in receiving, for God's sakes. And Joe Mixon's been injured the last couple of games. Like, this offense hasn't even really like fired on all cylinders yet.
Yeah, and I got a lot of flack for it again. Like, maybe was I a little harsh on Kyron? Absolutely. Like, I'm not going to take that away. But the premise of if you can get Joe Mixon plus for Kyron, like, I still remain holding on that because, quite frankly,
I would prefer Kyron straight to Joe Mixon because I do think Kupp will be back within the next 2 to 3 games, most likely.
Yeah, for sure. The way I look at it, though, is they have similar roles, except I believe Mixon has higher receiving upside.
Yeah, I can see how you get there. I mean, like, I have Joe Mixon at 14 at running back. I do have him one spot behind Bijan Robinson because I feel pretty good about this Washington offense. Even though they played an easy schedule, I mean, the confidence level is sky high with this offense. Bijan Robinson's getting a good workload, so on and so forth. But yeah, I mean, if you're willing to sell off, David Montgomery, Jordan Mason, James Conner, maybe even like I doubt you're getting a whole lot for Travis Etienne right now, but I would rather have Joe Mixon than him. Tony Pollard, definitely a guy that has had some good games. You can maybe get to Joe Mixon using a guy like that. There's a number of guys. I mean, Devin Singletary's been getting a good workload. Maybe you can use a 2-for-1 tier up with Devin Singletary. Mixon's the type of guy that, again, if you're 3-1, if you're 4-0, he's the type of guy you need to be sending offers for.
It's pretty crazy. If you guys have watched the channel for the last few years, when have we ever talked about Mixon being a buy? This is the first.
Yeah, no, it pretty much is. And we can pivot right into the sells. I talked about Jordan Mason already. The reason I think he's a good sell is because, again, we're tailoring this running back trade targets video to those of you guys that are in a winning position, 3-1, 4-0 type of team. If you have Jordan Mason, there's a good chance that your record is good because Jordan Mason has been great and you probably got him for nothing because that's what he was going for. After drafts were over, he was a waiver pickup, or you picked him up after week 1, or you drafted him super late in your draft. All fantasy doctors seem to be in agreement between Deepak, JM Thrive, Dr. Jesse Morris, Edwin. Everybody seems to be in agreement that the likely timeline we're looking at for Christian McCaffrey is somewhere between week 10 and 12. Pretty much every single doctor is in lockstep on that timeline. Why not sacrifice a little bit of immediate production in Jordan Mason and go after a better late season play? I'm not actually suggesting you sell Jordan Mason for Christian McCaffrey, where you'd be like losing that immediate production and having to wait and not have a usable starter. But again, Jordan Mason.
How much do you have to add on to Mason for Achane right now?
That's precisely what I'm talking about. Jordan Mason is a guy that is a bonus for a lot of people. Like, you didn't have to rely on this guy. He's just like a bonus RB1, RB2 production piece that you could probably use to get up to Bijan Robinson, to get up to Breece Hall, to get up to James Cook, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kyron Williams, Devon Achane, Jonathan Taylor, whoever you want to go after. Jordan Mason is gravy. You can use him plus another piece to go after somebody who's going to be an awesome season-long contributor. And again, Jordan Mason is still a good option to hold because Christian McCaffrey is risky even when he comes back and that kind of thing. But at some point, McCaffrey should be on the field this season. And why not sell on Jordan Mason now when he's got like all of this production value, sacrifice a little bit of that? Again, week over week, is Jordan Mason going to rank higher than Joe Mixon? Is Jordan Mason going to rank higher than James Cook or some of these other guys? I mean, maybe. It's like depends on matchups.
Probably until McCaffrey's back. But the way I view it is, especially when you can get a guy that projects, at least with Mixon, Kyron, some of these other guys, as a mid to back end RB1. Well, that's already what Mason is, except with those guys, you don't have the risk of a guy who can literally be the RB1 overall coming back in their backfield. That's what it is.
There's no ticking time bomb on their workload. Like Jordan Mason, the second McCaffrey's on the field, like, to make no mistake, he's no longer a startable asset.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, we could also talk about the fact that if there's a week where he doesn't have the production, or maybe Garendo works in a little bit, again, I'm not saying that's a likely scenario, but basically what I'm trying to say is he's not as value insulated as some of those other running backs on the market right now because of the fear about McCaffrey, because he's riding production right now. What if the production stops in a week or two? Like, there's just so many unknowns. Again, I love Mason. He's going to be a guy I rank in the RB 5 to 7 range in the majority of my weeks, but there's just less risky options at market value for what Mason. So if you can ship him off, again, that's another thing too. Like we just said, if you have Mason, you're probably 3-1. You're probably 4-0. Shout out Sal, who actually is 1-3 with Mason, but that's another topic. But anyways, with Jordan Mason, people are going to be looking at him on your team and thinking, maybe he's what I need to get wins because it's working for this guy.
Yeah, no, that is actually a very good psychological point, that people are going to look at Jordan Mason and be like, I need wins now. Who's the definition of win now? Right now, it's get the guy who's the starting running back for one of the best offenses in the NFL, and he's win now because eventually Christian McCaffrey is going to come back.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's the perfect thesis. Like, we're looking at some of these deals. You can get Marvin Harrison from Mason. We shouldn't have to tell you, if you can get Marvin Harrison for Jordan Mason, you go and make that move. You get Brandon Ayuk and Lamb McConkey for Jordan Mason. Again, I view Jordan Mason and Brandon Ayuk on a week-to-week basis. Yeah, is Ayuk in a downturn right now? Sure. But I still think Ayuk can be a top 15 wide receiver rest of the season. Again, people are very pessimistic on them. If you can get insulation also with Ladd, who showed a breakout this week with 5 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown, this is a perfect move to make. And you also have one listed here. If you can get Chris Godwin, dude, like, I don't think people have caught on quite yet that Chris Godwin is just one of the biggest lock high-end wide receiver 2s, low-end wide receiver 1s this season.
Yeah, no, we're using him super well. And the other thing about Godwin that's great is that he's totally matchup proof. Like, if we have, like, when we played the Broncos, it's like Patrick Surtain's going to shut down Mike Evans.
Christopher Kupp.
He ain't touching Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin's going to work all over the formation. He's going to avoid those top shadow corners. Like, the only time you get screwed out of a bad matchup with Chris Godwin is then the whole offense craters. That's the only way.
Exactly. I mean, I've called them before. Christopher Kupp, Cooper Godwin, whatever you want to slice it. He is the Cooper Kupp of this offense.
Absolutely. So, final running back that we're going to talk about here is Kenneth Walker, who admittedly has been spectacular when he's been on the field.
Again, I am not going out here and telling you to sell Kenneth Walker for scraps, because I feel like last week people kind of misconstrued me that you should just get Kyron off your team. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, if Kenneth Walker, instead of a top 12-ish running back, is being valued as a mid-range RB1, if not higher in your league, based off what he's done in the 2 weeks he's healthy, a guy who was the RB1 overall on an island game this week, over 34 PPR points. I know that because I actually had him against Corey in our listener league, redraft league this week, but I love Kenneth Walker. I think he's very comfortably a top 12, top 13 running back rest of the season. But I also just mentioned that if Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Achane are currently available in your league, Kenneth Walker is the perfect piece to tier up to those guys. And in fact, you might even be able to get any of those guys straight up for Kenneth Walker right now in your league. Because when we're looking at it, everybody's optimistic about the Seahawks offense, myself included. But Zach Charbonnet still had a decent role in this team. And Kenneth Walker is still playing 60% of the snaps. And he's being treated right now like he is an untouchable asset in fantasy football. The reason why I'm saying that is that when we're looking at some of these deals, you can work up to Jahmyr Gibbs right now. I'd be willing to do that. Again, Xavier Worthy versus Kenneth Walker. You're talking about the valuation. If you need depth, maybe you take the Walker and Worthy side. But if you're in a situation where Worthy was your wide receiver 5 and you can go upgrade to Jahmyr Gibbs, I feel more confident about Jahmyr Gibbs moving forward. Can you move Kenneth Walker and Jaden Daniels, who, again, I still like? He's my quarterback 4 on the season. I still think he's a stud. Can you go out there and get Marvin Harrison Jr. plus Mike Evans? Can you go out there and get Garrett Wilson for Kenneth Walker plus Najee Harris? Maybe you're specifically low on Garrett Wilson. Substitute any, back-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 into that equation. And this deal as well. If you need a quarterback, I think this is also a very good transition to make. Going out there and getting Jaden Daniels and A.J. Brown for Kenneth Walker and Deontay Johnson. This is what I mean. I'm not just saying sell Kenneth Walker for where we valued him going into the season. I think if we had to redraft today, Kenneth Walker would probably be 2-3 turn pick, late to mid-second, around there, give or take. But at the same time, if you can go out there and get a guy that we value as a first-round asset, you have to go do your due diligence.
Yeah, I mean, I have him RB11 rest of the season. He's right in that range with like Kamara at 8, Derrick Henry at 9, Kyron at 10, Aaron Jones at 12, and then Mixon, Brian Robinson kind of mix into that area, pun intended. So with Kenneth Walker, he's a good option. Like you said, he's a very solid RB1, high-end RB2. But the workload does see a little bit of a downtick because of Charbonnet. And the other thing, too, is like when anybody's coming off of spike weeks who's not a high-end RB1, and when the high-end RB1s are coming off of down weeks, then go after him. Like, what do you have to lose? Like, it costs you Kenneth Walker and, Michael Pittman, who had a good game, to go up and get Breece Hall. Like, you have to go do that if that's on the table.
Yeah, like Kenneth Walker had, 3 touchdowns from inside the 5-yard line this week? Or was it 2? And then he had, obviously, the breakaway run, right? So he had 3 touchdowns this week. It's good process to just see what your league's at when a guy scores 3 touchdowns. Plain and simple.
Yeah. In my home league, I won a championship in 2020 because I sold Aaron Jones off of a 4-touchdown game against the
Dallas,
Detroit
right?
Lions.
Oh.
And I got Alvin Kamara and something else. No, I got A.J. Brown and Joe Mixon in that deal. And A.J. Brown was a monster that year. Joe Mixon was very good until he suffered an injury. But 2 weeks before he got injured, I sold him for Alvin Kamara, and Alvin Kamara scored 6 touchdowns on Christmas. So Yeah, wheeling and dealing, trading up, trying to tier up. That's precisely what we do. We're the fantasy
stock exchange.
Exchange. Yeah. Exchange is the third word of our channel's name. We like to exchange players for better players. That's exactly what we're doing. Kenneth Walker, great hit. Good job. You drafted Kenneth Walker. He was a huge hit. Bijan Robinson, huge hit. All these guys that we've said on these sell high videos, they've all been hits. It's not like we're saying they're terrible. It's that you could go get better players.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing you guys got to take away. I'm not saying that, just because Bijan Robinson or Kenneth Walker's on the sell high list that they were bad picks. No, in fact, they were awesome picks, which is why we're trying to go out there and buy people that was actually selected in the top 3 rounds of our drafts at the cheap right now. Because like I said, I think Walker can get you up to any running back, maybe barring Saquon Barkley in fantasy right now.
Yeah, probably. And inevitably, you're going to look back at your draft at some point during the season and be like, oh man, I wish I passed. I wish I didn't take this guy. I wish I passed on this player. I wish I had drafted this guy instead. But inevitably, you probably hit on 4 or 5 of your picks in the first 8, 9 rounds.
Yeah.
And those guys are probably fixtures of your starting lineup. And the other guys, you're waiting for spike weeks to come up so that you can sell off of them. Or maybe one of the guys you didn't think was going to be very good. You took, I took Aaron Jones in the 9th round or the 8th round of our listener redraft league. I didn't think really too much of it. I was like, oh, it was a good value at the time. But I ended up using him to trade up to get James Cook.
You know what's hilarious about that, by the way? The same shit happened to me last year in the listener league where I settled on 8th round Aaron Jones and he was really good. I mean, the point is, if you're in an FSC redraft league, maybe some of these older depreciating backs actually have some value.
Yeah, and I did the same thing last year in our listener league too, where I got DeAndre Swift in the 8th round, and he was actually pretty solid for me all year long as my RB2. So,
Sure.
Yeah, moral of the story is when you have good running backs, ride the good weeks. Obviously, we want to score points and win the championship. That's ultimately the goal. But recognize when your running back is maybe overvalued. And Kenneth Walker, Jordan Mason might be a little bit overvalued for what they are. I think Kenneth Walker, back-end RB1, high-end RB2 for the rest of the season. Breece Hall, high-end RB1. If you can get anywhere close to Breece Hall with Kenneth Walker, you have to do it. Same goes for Jordan Mason. Mid-RB2, given the production he's going to give you for the next 6 weeks or so. But rest of season, he's a mid-RB2 because the high-end RB1 or the mid-RB1 production ain't coming for, 10 more games.
And I think you made the best point here. The biggest thing I always see is people are only incentivized to trade when they're 0-4, when they're 1-3, maybe 2-2. A lot of times when I see people say, well, you're 4-0, you're 3-1, are you navigating the trade offers? Are you navigating the trade market?
Why would I trade is what they're thinking. My team is great. It's you should trade because there's a very good chance you have guys that are overperforming expectations because 100%. You're 4-0, because you're 3-1. I mean, if you just have an elite team, obviously kudos to you and nobody's overvalued, but there's a very good chance that's not the case unless you're drafting with complete sand eaters.
Unless you have a couple of my dynasty teams, but all jokes aside, yeah,
in
exactly.
Redraft, it's a lot more difficult to have teams like that. There's you probably if you hit on a lot of your picks, it's you drafted Derrick Henry, you drafted Bijan Robinson, you drafted Kenneth Walker, you drafted Malik Neighbors, you drafted a bunch of guys that have been hits for you, but there's a good chance that 1 or 2 of those guys you could use to tier up into more solidified starters for the rest of the season. So
100%.
End of this video, leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment down below on your trades. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Our rest of season rankings are fully up to date. So if you want to use our dynasty trade calculator, redraft trade calculator, or dynasty trade calculator, whatever type of league you're playing in, our rankings are up to date. You can head on over to the site, use promo code FSE when you sign up over on flockfantasy.com. Promo code FSE gets you 7 days for free, 30% off, 6 months off when you sign up annually. When you sign up annually, you also get a free voucher to get a team reviewed by either of us if you want to have that happen for you. And also, too, you can use our trade calculator with our rankings in it. So if you want to use my rankings or Danny's rankings in the trade calculator, when you sign up using code FSE, you can see the trade offer on the table, what we would tell you to do in that situation if you're looking for our opinion. And, we haven't gotten back to your comment or whatever the case is. So definitely check that out if you're interested in that. Promo code FSE over on Underdog. Of course, they are the official show sponsor here. If you want to support us, use code FSE, deposit $10. You get our weekly start set rankings for free for the remainder of the season. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.